Welcome to the first lesson in our Introduction to International Relations series. Before we define the subject, think about an ordinary morning. You may check a phone designed in one country, assembled in another, and built with components produced across several regions. You may drink coffee grown thousands of kilometers away. Then you open the news and see that a conflict, an election, a shipping disruption, or a change in energy prices is affecting people far beyond the place where it began. International relations helps us understand these connections. In this lesson, we will explore what the field studies, its key concepts, why global politics matters, and how world politics is changing. Let us begin with a simple definition. International relations, often shortened to IR, is the study of interactions that cross national borders. It examines how countries relate to one another, but it also looks beyond governments. This field studies international organizations, businesses, civil society groups, communities, and individuals whose actions shape global outcomes. International relations asks questions, such as, why do states cooperate? Why do conflicts begin? How are international rules created? Who has power in the world? And how do global decisions affect ordinary people? In other words, international relations is not only about diplomats and presidents. It is about the systems, relationships, choices, and consequences that connect the world. The words international and relations are both important. International points to activity between or across countries. Relations refers to patterns of interaction, cooperation, competition, negotiation, trade, conflict, communication, and exchange. These relationships can be friendly, tense, unequal, temporary, or deeply institutionalized. Some are formal, such as a treaty between governments. Others are informal, such as cooperation among scientists or public pressure created through social media. The field therefore studies both official and unofficial connections. It also recognizes that a single issue can involve many kinds of relationships at the same time. A trade dispute, for example, may include economic competition, diplomatic negotiation, domestic politics, legal rules, and public opinion. For much of modern history, states have been the central actors in international relations. A state is a political unit with a population, a defined territory, a government, and the ability to conduct relations with other states. States make laws, collect taxes, provide public services, maintain security forces, and represent their societies internationally. They also vary greatly in size, wealth, influence, and military capability. Because states possess legal authority over territory and participate in diplomacy, treaties, and international organizations, they remain essential to the study of world politics. However, focusing only on states would give us an incomplete picture of today's international system. Many other actors now influence global affairs. Intergovernmental organizations bring states together to address shared problems. Non-governmental organizations advocate for humanitarian relief, development, human rights, or the environment. Multinational corporations move capital, technology, products, and jobs across borders. News organizations and digital platforms shape how people understand events. Cities create international partnerships. Scientists build research networks. Social movements mobilize supporters across countries. Even individuals can have global influence through leadership, innovation, activism, or communication. These actors do not replace states, but they interact with them, challenge them, support them, and sometimes change what governments are able or willing to do. The first key concept is sovereignty. Sovereignty means that a state has authority over its own territory and political affairs. It is connected to independence and the principle that outside actors should not simply control another state's domestic decisions. Yet sovereignty is not absolute in practice. States enter agreements, join organizations, accept international rules, and respond to economic or diplomatic pressure. Governments also face challenges that cross borders, such as pollution, cyber attacks, disease, migration, and financial instability. This creates a continuing tension. States want to protect their independence, but they also need cooperation to solve problems they cannot manage alone. A second key concept is power. In international relations, power is the ability to influence outcomes or shape the behavior of others. Power can come from military strength, economic resources, population, technology, geography, institutions, information, or attractive ideas and culture. Sometimes, power is direct. One actor pressures another to change a policy. Sometimes it is indirect. An actor sets the rules, controls access to resources, or defines which issues receive attention. Power is also relational. A country may be influential in one area, but less influential in another. Understanding power, therefore, requires us to ask not only who is strongest, but also strong in what way, over whom, under what conditions, and for what purpose. Closely related to power is national interest. National interest refers to the goals that a government believes are important for the security, prosperity, values, or influence of its country. These goals may include protecting territory, maintaining economic growth, securing energy supplies, supporting citizens abroad, or building alliances. However, national interest is not always obvious or universally agreed upon. Different leaders, political parties, businesses, communities, and citizens may define it differently. A policy presented as serving the national interest may benefit some groups more than others. This is why international relations also examines domestic debates and asks who defines a country's priorities. Security is another central idea. Traditionally, security focused on protecting the state from military threats. This remains important, but the concept has expanded. Today, scholars and policymakers also discuss economic security, energy security, food security, health security, environmental security, and cybersecurity. This broader view asks whether people and societies are protected from serious threats to their survival and well-being. It also reveals that security policies can create difficult trade-offs. A government may increase surveillance to reduce cyber risks, for example, but citizens may worry about privacy. Studying security means examining both the threat and the consequences of the response. International relations also studies conflict and cooperation. Conflict occurs when actors pursue goals that appear incompatible. It can take the form of disagreement, economic pressure, political rivalry, violence, or war. Cooperation occurs when actors coordinate their behavior to achieve shared or compatible goals. Cooperation does not require friendship. States may cooperate because it is useful, because rules encourage it, because they face a common threat, or because they expect long-term benefits. Conflict and cooperation can even happen at the same time. Two countries may disagree on security issues while trading heavily and cooperating on public health. World politics is rarely a simple choice between peace and conflict. It is usually a mixture of both. Diplomacy is one of the main tools used to manage these relationships. Diplomacy is the process of communication and negotiation among political actors, especially governments. Diplomats explain positions, gather information, build trust, bargain over agreements, reduce misunderstandings, and search for peaceful solutions. Diplomacy can occur publicly at summits, or quietly through private meetings. It can involve bilateral talks between two countries or multilateral talks involving many participants. Successful diplomacy does not always produce a perfect agreement. Often, it produces a compromise that is acceptable enough for the parties to avoid a worse outcome. Another key concept is interdependence. Interdependence means that actors are connected in ways that make them affect one another. Trade, finance, technology, transportation, energy, communication, and supply chains create mutual dependence across borders. Interdependence can produce benefits, access to goods, investment, knowledge, and new markets. But it can also create vulnerability. A disruption in one location may cause shortages or higher costs elsewhere. Dependence may also be unequal, giving one side more leverage than the other. International relations therefore studies both the opportunities and the risks created by a connected world. The field also examines international order and global governance. International order refers to the broad pattern of rules, institutions, expectations, and power relationships that organize world politics. Global governance describes the ways international problems are managed through formal institutions, agreements, networks, and shared practices. There is no single world government with complete authority over all countries. Instead, governance is spread across many levels and organizations. This system can coordinate action, but it can also be slow, unequal, or contested. When we study global governance, we ask, who makes the rules? Who follows them? Who benefits? Who is excluded? And what happens when major actors disagree? The scope of international relations is therefore very wide. It includes war and peace, diplomacy, foreign policy, international law, trade, development, human rights, migration, regional cooperation, technology, climate change, culture, and global inequality. These topics are connected. A drought can reduce food production, increase prices, encourage migration, intensify political tension, and create demands for international assistance. A new technology can improve communication while also creating cybersecurity risks and competition over data. International relations helps us trace these connections instead of studying each problem in isolation. International relations can be studied at different levels of analysis. At the individual level, we examine leaders, decision-makers, beliefs, and psychology. At the state level, we examine political institutions, public opinion, economic conditions, national identity, and domestic interests. At the international level, we examine the distribution of power, alliances, international rules, and the absence of a central global authority. At the transnational or global level, we examine networks and forces that operate across borders. Using more than one level helps us avoid overly simple explanations. A crisis may result from a leader's choices, domestic pressure, regional rivalry, and global economic conditions all at once. Why should we study global politics? First, because global politics is part of everyday life. International events influence prices, jobs, travel, education, technology, energy, and public health. Decisions made far away can affect what is available in local stores or which industries grow in your community. At the same time, local choices can have international consequences through consumption, voting, investment, communication, and activism. Studying international relations helps us recognize these links and understand that the global and the local are not separate worlds. Second, the subject develops critical thinking. Global issues are often presented through short headlines, emotional images, or competing political messages. International relations encourages us to slow down and ask better questions. What evidence supports this claim? Which actors are involved? What interests do they have? What historical experiences shape their behavior? What alternative explanations exist? What are the likely consequences of different choices? These habits help us move beyond simple labels, such as good versus bad, or strong versus weak. They do not remove moral judgment, but they make our judgment more informed and responsible. Third, studying global politics prepares us for participation and professional life. The knowledge and skills of international relations are useful in government, international organizations, business, journalism, education, law, development, security, and non-profit work. Even outside these careers, people make decisions as citizens, consumers, workers, and community members in an interconnected world. The goal is not to memorize every country or predict every crisis. The goal is to build a framework for understanding change, comparing explanations, communicating across differences, and making thoughtful decisions under uncertainty. World politics is also changing. The first major change is that influence is more widely distributed. Powerful states remain important, but they operate alongside regional powers, international institutions, corporations, cities, networks, and public movements. The second change is the speed of connection. Information, money, images, and political messages move across borders almost instantly. Events can gain global attention before governments have time to respond. This creates new opportunities for cooperation and participation, but also for misinformation, polarization, and manipulation. A third change is the rise of transnational challenges. Climate change, pandemics, cyber threats, organized crime, financial shocks, and forced displacement do not fit neatly within national borders. No country can fully isolate itself from these problems, and no country can solve them alone. Yet cooperation is difficult because states have different interests, capabilities, responsibilities, and levels of trust. This is one of the central puzzles of contemporary international relations. How can independent actors coordinate effectively when they disagree about costs, rules, and priorities? A fourth change is the growing importance of technology. Digital communication can connect activists, businesses, governments, and communities across continents. Artificial intelligence, satellites, drones, and data systems can support development and public services, but they can also transform surveillance, warfare, and political influence. Cyberspace has become an arena of cooperation and competition. Technology, therefore, changes not only the tools used in world politics, but also the actors who possess influence, the speed of decisions, and the meaning of security. A fifth change is that questions of identity, justice, and representation have become increasingly visible in global debate. People ask whose voices are heard, whose history is remembered, and whose interests are protected by international rules. Issues such as inequality, race, gender, colonial legacies, religion, nationalism, and cultural difference shape both domestic and international politics. These questions remind us that global politics is not only about material power, it is also about ideas, values, belonging, legitimacy, and competing visions of a fair international order. To see how these ideas connect, consider a fictional public health emergency that begins in one country and spreads through international travel. States control borders and health policy, showing sovereignty. Governments define national interests and decide how to allocate limited resources. Scientists, health organizations, companies, and local communities become important actors. Supply chains reveal interdependence. Misinformation creates political challenges. International rules and institutions support coordination, but disagreements over cost, access, and responsibility may create conflict. This single example shows why international relations requires us to examine many actors, concepts, and levels at the same time. As you continue this course, remember 4 guiding questions. First, who are the important actors? Second, what do they want? Third, what sources of power, rules, or constraints shape their choices? Fourth, what consequences follow for different groups of people? These questions can be applied to almost any topic in international relations. They will help you organize complex information and compare different explanations without assuming that one simple answer is always enough. Let us review. International relations studies interactions across borders and the global outcomes created by states and many other actors. Its key concepts include sovereignty, power, national interest, security, diplomacy, conflict, cooperation, interdependence, international order, and global governance. We study global politics because it affects everyday life, strengthens critical thinking, and prepares us to participate in an interconnected world. Finally, world politics is changing through new actors, faster communication, transnational challenges, technological transformation, and stronger debates about identity and justice. In the next lesson, we will begin studying the major theories of international relations. We will ask why different scholars can observe the same event, but explain it in very different ways. We will focus first on realism and neorealism, which emphasize power, security, and the structure of the international system. But before we finish today's lesson, stay with me for a quiz challenge to test what you've learned in the next section. Question number 1. Which statement best describes international relations? A. The study of politics only within individual countries. B. The study of interactions that cross national borders and shape global outcomes. C. The study of international trade and business only. D. The study of wars between powerful countries. Here's your hint. International relations includes governments, but it also looks at organizations, businesses, groups, communities, and individuals. The correct answer is B. International relations studies interactions across national borders. It examines states as well as international organizations, businesses, civil society groups, communities, and individuals that influence global outcomes. Here's question number 2. What does sovereignty mean in international relations? A. The ability of a country to control all other countries. B. A state's authority over its own territory and political affairs. C. The economic dependence of one country on another. D. The ability of international organizations to make national laws. Here's your hint. Think about a state's independence and authority within its own territory. If you said B, you're absolutely correct. Sovereignty refers to a state's authority over its territory and political affairs. However, the lesson also explains that sovereignty is not absolute, because states cooperate, join organizations, accept rules, and face cross-border challenges. Alright, here's question number 3. Which of the following is identified in the lesson as an important change in contemporary world politics? A. International communication is becoming slower. B. Only governments now influence international affairs. C. Transnational problems increasingly cross national borders. Here's your hint. Think about problems such as climate change, pandemics, cyber threats, and financial shocks. The correct answer is C. Many major challenges now cross national borders and cannot be solved by one country acting alone. This makes international cooperation increasingly important and often difficult. Moving on to fill-in-the-blank questions. Question number 4. A state's authority over its own territory and political affairs is called what? Here's your hint. This concept is closely connected to independence. If you said sovereignty, you're absolutely correct. Sovereignty is one of the central concepts of international relations and describes a state's authority over its territory and domestic political affairs. Now, moving on to question number 5. When countries and other actors are connected in ways that cause them to affect one another, this is called what? Here's your hint. Think about global supply chains, trade, finance, energy, and technology. If you said interdependence, you're absolutely correct. Remember, interdependence means that actors depend on and affect one another. It can create benefits, but it can also create vulnerabilities when problems in one place spread elsewhere. Alright, here's question number 6. The process of communication and negotiation among political actors, especially governments, is called what? Here's your hint. Ambassadors and government representatives commonly use this tool to manage relationships peacefully. If you said diplomacy, you're absolutely correct. Diplomacy uses communication and negotiation to explain positions, build trust, reduce misunderstandings, reach agreements, and search for peaceful solutions. Moving on to short answer questions. Question number 7. Why is studying global politics important in everyday life? Give 2 examples of how international events can affect you. And here's your hint. Think about prices, jobs, travel, education, technology, energy, and public health. Here's a sample answer. Studying global politics is important because events and decisions in other countries can affect our daily lives. For example, an international shipping disruption can increase the prices of goods, while an international health crisis can affect travel and public health. Here's question number 8. Can two countries experience conflict and cooperation at the same time? Briefly explain your answer, and here's your hint. Countries do not have to agree on every issue in order to cooperate in some areas. Here's a sample answer. Yes, two countries may disagree or compete over security issues while still trading with each other or cooperating on public health, disaster response, or other shared problems. Remember, international relationships are rarely completely cooperative or completely conflictual. Countries may compete in one area while cooperating in another. Here's our final question. Question number 9. Identify 2 ways that world politics is changing and briefly explain each one. And here's your hint. Think about new actors, faster communication, cross-border challenges, technology, identity, justice, and representation. Here's a sample answer. One change is that influence is becoming more widely distributed because corporations, international organizations, cities, networks, and public movements now play important roles alongside states. Another change is the growing importance of technology, which allows information to move quickly across borders, but also creates challenges such as surveillance, cyber conflict, and misinformation. Remember, in our lesson, we explored several major changes: a wider distribution of influence, faster global communication, more transnational challenges, technological transformation, and greater attention to identity, justice, and representation. Great job! You've made it to the end of today's lesson on Introduction to International Relations and completed the quiz challenge. In the next lesson, we'll explore the theories of international relations. We'll dive deep into realism and neoliberalism. Thanks for watching. Until next time, take care.